Welcome back to Draft Genius, and in this video we're going to take a look at Najee Harris, running back out of Alabama. So let's start with measurables like we always do. According to Alabama's website, Najee Harris is listed at 6'2" and weighs 230 pounds. 6'2", you typically don't see running backs that size, that height. So when we look at it from that aspect, Najee Harris, he is a unique athletic specimen at running back, being as tall as he is. But overall, I think he passes the eye test. He's a big dude, tall dude, but he looks the part. Really nice, solid build, and he definitely looks the part at running back, if you ask me. Now, moving on to his career, what did he do over the course of his career? Well, Najee Harris, he was at Alabama for 4 years, and he played a lot of football over the course of those 4 years. Played a little bit during his freshman and sophomore years, even though he was behind guys. And the past 2 years, his junior and senior season, he took over the workload, and he had a lot of carries. Now, some people might not like that. Some people might be afraid because he has a little bit more wear and tear on his body than most guys probably would. But like I said before, he shared carries those first 2 seasons with several guys that went on to be NFL backs, guys that went on to get drafted. So he shared carries those first 2 years, and only these past 2 seasons where he took over the workload, it's really where he was really asked to be that guy and do everything in the run game for Bama. So his junior season had his breakout season, finished that season with 1,224 yards, 1,224 yards, and 13 touchdowns, and just continued that success and continued that production into his senior year this past season, where he ran for 1,466 yards and 26 touchdowns. So this kid, he's played a lot of football. He's played a lot of good football over the course of his 4-year career at Alabama. And I don't think anybody can deny the fact that he's one of the best backs in the nation. Career accomplishments this past season, Doak Walker Award. Just talking about him being one of the best backs in the nation. Well, he won the award for the best back in the nation, the Doak Walker Award this past season. So really good by him. He also was a unanimous All-American. So just really did his thing this past season, and has really been doing his thing since he arrived at Alabama. He's just one of those guys that had to wait in line for a couple of years, and when he got his opportunities, he took advantage of them. Now let's get into what Najee Harris can do on the field. First of all, I think this is something that needs to be pointed out, and it's not a knock on him or anything like that. It's just the nature of the position that he plays. And I wanted to point out that Alabama does have one of the best offensive lines in the country, if not the best. They consistently produce first-round linemen every year, and they're consistently having one of the best running attacks in the country. So I think that's something that needs to be pointed out. It's not an indictment on Najee Harris. It's just the fact that offensive line play is really, really important to what a back can go out there and accomplish. And I want people to really, really understand that, because I think it does get brushed over a bit. But if you don't have quality offensive line play, and most importantly, if you don't have an offensive line coach that can go out there and coach the position effectively, then you're not going to be good in the run game. You're not going to be effective in the run game, no matter how good the back is. Now, there will be those occasions where you have those rare guys and they can make something out of nothing whenever they're on the field, but most of the time you're not going to have those guys. So I just wanted to point that out. Alabama, really good offensive line, not an indictment on Najee Harris at all. So what you're going to hear a lot is people comparing him to Derrick Henry, and I get that. Both Alabama guys, bigger backs, strong guys, both had dreads. All that stuff is really easy to compare those guys, but I don't really think Derrick Henry is a good comparison for Najee Harris. I think he's a little bit, actually I think he's a lot more fluid than Derrick Henry is as a runner. I thought this when Derrick Henry was coming out. I thought he was tall, 6'2", big back. He played, and I think he still continues to play like a tall, big back. Now, it was working out for him in Tennessee. He's been doing his thing, but that was a concern with Derrick Henry. With Najee Harris, I don't think he plays like that. I think he's way more fluid in his hips. He's way more fluid of a runner than Derrick Henry is overall. Najee Harris, he's got a lot of bounce. Once he hits the line of scrimmage, he's really patient, and he has like a similar patience to a guy like Le'Veon Bell, where Le'Veon would attack the hole and he wouldn't necessarily just put his head down and run right into the line of scrimmage. He would be patient and he would let things happen and let things develop, and then he would find creases within the defense. Najee Harris has a similar type of bounce and a similar type of pace that he plays with, and it's really hard to describe. But if you watch enough football and you watch Najee Harris enough and enough good running back play, then you can really notice and understand what I'm talking about. So, like I said before, with a guy like Derrick Henry, a tall 6'2", 6'3" guy, he runs like it, he plays like it. And like I said, it's working out for him, but I don't think Najee Harris does that. He's a bigger guy, and he does a good job of running behind his pads, really almost hiding behind the line of scrimmage and then finding a crease in the defense. I don't know how he does it, but he's really effective at that for a bigger guy. He just always does a good job of finding creases and finding little openings in the defense. And when he finds them, he hits it. And I think it's a really impressive thing to see a bigger tailback doing those types of things. He's also got really loose hips. Like I said before, he's not as stiff as a Derrick Henry. He's not as stiff as most bigger backs, especially in the hips. He has really loose hips. He has good feet, and he just looks very fluid as an athlete, and that's something you wouldn't expect out of a guy that size. And to go along with that, he's also a guy that runs hard. Now, he's not necessarily a Derrick Henry, where guys are just legitimately scared to tackle him, and even when you do tackle him, you're gonna feel it. You might get him down, but you're gonna feel it. So with Derrick Henry, I think a lot of what makes him successful is intimidation. A lot of guys just don't want to hit him. But with Najee Harris, I think what he does really well is he just runs hard. Like he's gonna fight for every yard. He's gonna strain, and he's gonna pick up every inch that he can. And when you have guys like that, you really have to get bodies around those guys, because the first guy's not going to do it. The second guy might not do it. He might, you might have his ankle, you might have his leg, and he's still squirming, still trying to find a way to get out of that tackle. And sometimes he does it, and he pops out of, and he pops away from a few guys and breaks off an extra 10, 15 yards on a run. So he's the type of guy that you're going to have to get bodies around, because he never stops. He runs really hard, really reminds me of a guy like Kareem Hunt, just the effort and the strain and how hard he runs. I think that's a really good thing that Najee Harris does. And pass protection is really important for backs, especially when it comes to blitz pickup and things like that. So I think a lot of that stuff is technique somewhat, but for a back in the backfield, you just got to be tough. You got to be willing to stick your nose in there and hit a guy, and that's really all it comes down to. And I think Najee Harris is big enough. He has the size. So in blitz pickup, if there's a blitzing linebacker, I don't think there's too many guys that just are going to run through Najee Harris' face mask. I don't think that's going to happen. He's 6'2", 230 pounds. And it's just not happening. So I also think he's tough enough, and that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. For backs in the backfield, pass protection ain't hard, doesn't require too much technique, not like an offensive lineman or anything like that. You just have to be willing to stick your nose in there and hit a guy, all to protect your quarterback. So I think Najee Harris is capable of that. Saw some things on film that I liked about what he does in pass pro. Also saw some things I didn't like, but overall I think he's big enough, he's tough enough, and I think he's more than willing to stick his nose in there and protect. Another interesting thing is that it didn't really seem like he was in a lot of pure blitz pickup situations. Alabama, they do a lot of check releases with him, get him out on routes. They like to get him out of the backfield and add him on to the pass concepts. They really get him involved that way, and they also do a ton of RPOs, so a lot of the times he's just carrying out run fakes and things like that. So not a ton of just pure blitz pickup situations from him on film, but from what I did see, it did a fairly decent job. Something that's always important with backs is catching the ball out of the backfield. If you're able to do that effectively as a tailback, then that makes you that much more valuable. That makes you that much more dynamic of a weapon, and you can really do some things as an offense when you have those types of guys. I think Najee Harris is one of those guys. He's very comfortable catching the ball out of the backfield. Doesn't fight the ball like a lot of running backs do. You don't see him struggling. He honestly looks like a receiver at times, you know, when he's out there catching the ball. So he's going to be good in that area. I think he's a good enough route runner to get open against linebackers, especially coming out of the backfield where a lot of those routes aren't overly complicated. You just got a lot of like flat routes and angle routes and things like that, option routes out of the backfield for backs. And I think he's a good enough athlete and has a good enough understanding of those routes and of route running in general to be able to go out there and make those plays and run those routes and get open against linebackers. He's not a guy that I would put in the slot consistently. Not saying that he can't do that. I just think you'd be better off with a good receiver doing that. Not saying Najee Harris can't get in there in the slot and work against linebackers and nickels and safeties and stuff like that. He's just not good enough to the point where I would rather have him doing it than another receiver. So that's all I'm saying with that. Another thing I think is underrated that people don't talk about a lot is the screen game. I think he has a good feel for the screen game, and I think that is one of the most important things of having an effective screen game. You have to have a back that just has a feel for it. You know, you have to have a back that's really going to sell, you know, that is just a normal pass and that he's just there in protection and then he just slips out of the backfield and picks up a big gain. You really have to have a good feel for that. It takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of repetition, but when I see Najee Harris do it on film, I think he's really good at it. And then once he gets the ball in his hands, I mean, he's going to be difficult to bring down. I mean, he's 6'2", 230 pounds. So just imagine that guy catching the screen. He's got a couple linemen out in front of him, and then finally he breaks free and is one-on-one with a DB down the field. That's going to be a tough job for that DB. He's going to really struggle bringing a guy like Najee Harris down. So I think he's going to be really valuable as a pass catcher, regardless of how you decide to use him. He's shown that he can go out there and do what he needs to do as a receiver out of the backfield, and he's shown that he can be really effective in that area. So overall, Najee Harris is a productive running back with a very good skill set. Like I mentioned before, like we just went over, he's really effective as a runner, and he can give you the things you need as a pass catcher. So that's going to make him even more valuable. In my opinion, I don't think he's an elite guy. I don't think he has elite traits. When I look at guys that have come out recently, like Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, those types of guys all had something about their game that really stood out, something about their game that was elite, in my opinion, where it was like, okay, this guy's going to be good the moment he steps on the field. No doubt about it. He does things a little bit differently than you see other guys do. That's what I got when I watched those guys I just mentioned. I don't get that same feeling, and I don't think that with Najee Harris. Does that mean he's not going to be an effective NFL back? No, it doesn't mean that. I think he has all the skills to be an effective NFL running back. But when I'm talking about elite guys and elite traits, I just don't see that with Najee Harris. Also, like I mentioned before, he played behind the best offensive line in the country. He ran behind first-round picks on that offensive line. And it's not a knock on him, but it is something that needs to be pointed out when we evaluate any running back, especially guys near the top of the draft. You really have to talk about those types of things. And it's not to really, you know, make an assessment or make a definitive statement about that person's game. It's just to point out that regardless of how good that player is, he's going to have to be running behind a good offensive line. He's going to have a good offensive line coach that can coach that offensive line up. So those things matter. When I watch players, I think about those things, and it's something that I think needs to be considered. But overall, I think Najee Harris is a good player. Couldn't think of a really good comparison for him, so I'm not going to do the comparison thing. Now, this is a weird year. I don't think there are too many. I think there's a lot of good backs, but there's not like one standout guy, and I'm not quite sure if any of those backs get drafted in the first round. I'm not sure. This might be one of those years where there's not a tailback to go in the first round. But Najee Harris, based on what he was able to do at Alabama, he could be in the conversation to be that first back taken.